Welcome back to Access All Areas with Dermot and Felicity. And my way access Dermot Devlin, and with me always is the chronically fabulous Felicity McKee.
This week, we're going to be exploring the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, specifically with a focus on disabled people, but also more generally, as well as discussing lockdown, which is starting to occur again. So, for example, Swansea is going into lockdown from tomorrow, and we're recording this on a Saturday night. So I have less than 24 hours before lockdown's back, and also my hometown in Northern Ireland is in lockdown as well, so I don't actually know if I'm going to be home for Christmas. So lots of interesting topics to explore. But Dermot, what about yourself? How is where you are right now?
Well, today, obviously being Saturday, we got the news that here in the north of Ireland that we've had the highest number of infection cases since the very beginning. So today we've had 319 people who have been diagnosed as having the COVID-19 virus. So it's very worrying case, because as the trend locally and further afield goes, that the infection rate is starting to rise everywhere. And it's just something that people have to be very careful. If they haven't been careful before, it's imperative that they do take these extra precautions now, because we'll have to get on top of this before it starts to spiral out of control.
Yeah, and I think one of the main issues that I've been seeing from people is the argument that I'm healthy, so it doesn't impact me. And personally, as someone who has been shielding and who is high risk, I really struggle with that statement, because usually that's followed by it's only the sick and the old who will die. And granted, they're not saying this to my face, they're saying this online. Sorry, an example of brain fog in action there. But they're saying it online basically, and they're saying it to someone who is directly impacted by this. But the thing is, there are healthy people who have caught this and they have been left long-term sick as a result. But you also don't know who you're going to come into contact with. So say if you pick up the virus, you generally aren't impacted too badly by it, but you come into contact with someone who is maybe delivering post to people or lifting groceries for people, such as, bringing something back to me. They then carry the virus on themselves, back to me, I get sick, I potentially run the risk of dying. This is the sort of thing, it's the knock-on impact, and we really need to focus on sort of the community good and the fact that there is a ripple effect from the actions that people take. It's not just you who's at risk, it's the rest of us, it's the rest of society. And an example of this would be, I run a society at the university. We were discussing whether or not we should do face-to-face events. As a committee, we simply said, if we ran an event and someone got sick and died, could we live with ourselves if that happened? And the answer is no. I don't think we could. I don't think I could handle that personally.
Well, I couldn't understand where you're coming from, because I get very upset when I see the online comments. Whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or some of these younger apps that may be used, I don't be honest well. But it is very hurtful, because a lot of time people don't realise that that I can read these messages, and some of these comments are actually coming from what you would consider your close friends, and yet you seem to be forgotten in that conversation, because they're quick to get back out there. They're quick to get their life started again, and it feels like, okay, they want their life back. And I just think that people like myself and you, Felicity, are what would be termed as collateral damage for them, just so they can get back to living life or what it was like 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, some of us have never stopped shielding, and different people have been shielding in different ways. So for example, with me, I only left the house to go for medical appointments, which I couldn't access from home, and that was with special paperwork from the hospital in case I was stopped during lockdown. But I didn't get to go out for walks down the street. I didn't get to go to the park. I didn't get to do any of those things. I was inside basically 24/7 for months on end, and I'm still inside. And it does feel like generally people who've been shielding, anyone who is high risk, has been forgotten, because as we go into these second lockdowns, shielding isn't being implemented again. And a lot of the services and facilities that were put in place for people who were shielding, not that those weren't without their issues, because there were difficulties for people to access them, and not everybody who was shielding did manage to access them, but there's no definitive answer as to whether or not those will return. And because shielding hasn't been implemented, there are people who are high risk who are being told to go back in to work. And I spoke to someone actually when I was getting bloods at the hospital who told me that they were immunocompromised, and they simply put their foot down and demanded that their work provide a risk assessment as to, what would be the issues going on if they were to return to work and what the risk would be. And they wanted the name of the person who was doing the risk assessment, because if something happened to them, they wanted to know who it was who had decided that this risk was worth it. And it's one of those things, you can refuse to return into work at the minute, if your life is potentially at risk. And that is a valid excuse if you feel like it's not a safe environment. And a lot of people maybe aren't aware of this. They don't know that they can do it. And if you do have a union, I would definitely recommend talking to them about this. But again, it's the fact that we are going in to a second lockdown, and disabled people have once again been forgotten, and the impact.
Well, I'm like yourself, Felicity. Like I've been, as I put up on my reactions Facebook page yesterday, like a lot of people now are panicking and getting very upset that they're going into potentially lockdown number 2 now. As I said, well, myself and other disabled people are still in lockdown 1. And in case there's some other people who have commented to me on Facebook, and which is a great point that they highlighted, and one that I wish I had a thought of myself, that yes, I might be still in lockdown 1, but there's many other people, disabled people outside of ourselves, Felicity, who are always in lockdown, because of the immune system, and that needs to be remembered as well. But I have been looking out for I live in the countryside, and most of my family live in small areas as well. So, like, as you've probably been aware from podcasts in the past and from my way access daily updates on what I'm doing in my lockdown, that one of the great things for me was that my wee nieces live next door, so I can go and play with them in the garden. But because of things I'm doing now, I've sort of had to isolate myself the way that I don't think it's safe enough for me to do that anymore. Like I went to my brother's house as well to mix with them. I just can't do that. And over the last 6 months, I've only really left the house on several occasions, other than mixing within that bubble, to actually go and get my hearing aids sorted out and medical things. But out of the last 6 months, I've only ever left the house once for a social situation, and that was last week, that was outside my family. And it's something I've enjoyed, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do this once a month now, maybe next month, go out and get a meal to eat. And at this moment, no, I don't think I can do that anymore. And I've got the date now where, a friend would maybe now and again would actually come and visit me at the house, maybe every several weeks, somebody will come and just so I can feel connected. And now, to be honest, I think I'd be too scared to even go near it. Not because I think that they're the ones that messing about, because I know they're not. I don't know who they're coming into contact with, and I can't take that risk. Not just for myself, for my family and the people that I will be coming into contact with in my bubble.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about the fact that some people have been in lockdown long before lockdown ever became a thing. And, I have joked at times that, I had a lot of training for lockdown because I've had long stays in hospital. And I'm used to not being able to necessarily go out and go for walks or do what I want. But the main difference that I found for me was that, I could make cups of tea if I wanted, when I wanted, because I was at home, and there was a bit more freedom than, say, being in hospital. But again, it is the fact a lot of these people who are upset at a potential second lockdown and the impact of their lives, I think I would have less of an issue if they then thought, well, who else is maybe impacted long term, and if this is how I feel at the fact that I'm going to a second lockdown, how must those people feel, and what can we do to help change that going forward, because I'm now aware of this. And I'd like to see change happening as part of people learning and understanding other people's experiences during lockdown, but I'm not sure if it is going to happen, because if we look at the shops and the panic buying, generally that's not very community orientated. It's all very much about me, my initial needs, what I need, not necessarily what other people need. Because do you genuinely need all those packs of toilet paper? Probably not.
Well, again, that was something that we've all seen online at the very beginning of lockdown, but I have seen cases in recent weeks, in Australia, and indeed some places here in the north of Ireland. I'm sure you've probably seen it in Wales yourself. This panic buying of the toilet paper is starting to happen again. I don't see what the sense is in that. I don't get it myself, because these items will still be in the shop no matter what happens regarding lockdown, but it's totally inconsiderate because, as you rightly point out, and it just reinforces the whole ableism thing, which has become a lot more in your face in recent months than it has been over the last number of years. I'm out for myself now. I need to get the toilet paper, or I need to get back out in the real world. The hell is anybody else?
Yeah, and so for example, I recently put in an order with Sainsbury's with priority, and I had ordered just a couple of different things that I needed. And when I went back on just to update it, because I couldn't get any bookings for at least a week and a half, but when I went on to update it, a lot of the stuff that I had and I'd arranged to buy was no longer available, and they were offering substitutes because people have cleared the shelves. So very basic things. The rice that I wanted to buy, gone. And I think people aren't thinking about the impact. Food isn't going to just completely disappear. The shops will be restocked. There's no need to panic buy. And surely people have learnt from the previous panic buying that helps absolutely nothing. There's shops beginning to ration again, and I can understand why, but one of the things about rationing that I think hasn't been discussed is when Tesco started to ration at the start of the original lockdown, it meant you could only have 3 items, but they also removed their offers on things like 3 for 2. So if you were on a budget and you're trying to make the best of a shop and different things were on offer, they weren't honouring those anymore. So your shop can actually increase in cost. And when you're ordering groceries online, you have to reach a minimum in order to get the delivery, and that delivery can be quite expensive as well. So I've seen delivery be about £8-10, and sometimes you've only got £25 worth of groceries. £10 is a lot of money. That could buy a lot of food, and it's very difficult, I think, because it's not even just something that's impacting disabled people, it's impacting people who are below the poverty line as well. And we just, I think, need to have more of a sense of community with this and understanding that other people are impacted. And I think just checking in on each other, because again, mental health can be quite impacted by lockdown, and it's not
you say about the mental health aspect. There's many people that have seen the evidence myself online, and people that I'm talking to anecdotally say that maybe wouldn't necessarily have mental health issues before that, but the anxiety issues because of lockdown and because of isolation has increased over the last few months. And depression, and this isn't something that's going to end overnight. That when we come out of this, which could potentially be, as Boris Johnson said, potentially 6 months away, that things through the extreme lockdown could be eased again. Now, hopefully that's the worst case scenario that he's talking about, but potentially that's what we have to look at as a reality. And at the end of the 6 months, the people who are suffering the anxiety, suffering the depression that's coming from being isolated, that's not going to disappear as soon as they go outside again. This is going to impact them for maybe years to come, possibly a lifetime. Issues that could be raised from that, and that again with the mental health issue could impact them regarding physical health as well. So there's a lot of add-on things, and these could be addressed now if people would just use their common sense.
Yeah, it does seem that common sense isn't so common. But the thing is, though, while we do say that, people obviously there's stuff that they could do individually, a lot of the information from the government has been very confusing. I know that just personally, when it comes to accessing that information, I found it very difficult. I find that sometimes it's in formats that I personally struggle with, and I haven't seen it in other formats that I know some of my disabled friends would be able to access either. And again, it's about disabled people being forgotten. But
even ourselves, let's say before the podcast, according tonight, what we always do before the podcast, we spend maybe a half an hour talking about what we actually point that we want to hit, and we would do a bit of research online for that half hour, not to mention the research that we want to do on our own, maybe the day before that. And even in our discussion before that, we find out how to finally actually say, what are the specific lockdown restrictions here happening in the north of Ireland? What are the specific lockdown restrictions that's happening in Swansea and Wales? I know now that the lockdown happened here on the 22nd. I know what's happening in Donegal and the Fermanagh, in the Ban and the council about their high numbers, which could restrict access across the border, especially from people going to Dublin and that. But again, we don't actually have the concrete information because everything's just Friday in a haphazard way. There's nothing that makes sense. So I can understand there's a lot of confusion, but at the same time, there's basic things we know we can do, like wear a mask, sanitize our hands every day, keep that social distance, whether it be 2 meters or how ideally keep it 6 meters if it's possible. But a lot of people are refusing to do that, whether it's a case of it's a scandemic or it won't affect me or the whole thing's a hope or it's a part of a new world order, try and engineer it or try to socially condition us. Basic things we can do, but because of these ridiculous excuses, because people don't want to accept responsibility for themselves, that they won't take these simple actions, because they will go a long way, never mind the other stuff that we're trying to find the information out from the Irish and the Stormont and the Welsh and Westminster governments.
Yeah, and so like wearing your mask if you are able to, because obviously there are people who are medically exempt, is really important. And I know I would be classed as medically exempt, and you're also classed as medically exempt. And this is the thing, like obviously when you have a fluctuating disability, you can have good days and bad days. So there's days where I find it a lot more difficult to wear a mask, but I generally tend to wear my mask when I'm out. I wear it when I'm going to the hospital. This doesn't mean though that everybody can, but just the thing is, if you can, please wear your mask, and please wear your mask properly. So like your nose shouldn't be sticking out, it shouldn't be hanging off your ear or off your wrist. I've seen it worn as a hairband in some places, and people I think don't realize that the mask only is useful if you wear it properly. So like you have to sanitize your hands when you're putting on and off and things like this, and just how you store your mask is important, and making sure that if it's a reusable mask that you wash it. Some of these things I feel are common sense, but as I've said, like obviously it's not so common that common sense goes around, but at the same time the information from the government has made it very difficult, because we're getting information, what's happening in Scotland, what's happening in Northern Ireland, what's happening in England, what's happening in Wales, and it varies an awful lot, and some of it seems very strange. So for example, I double checked because I wasn't sure what was happening with the local lockdown here. So extended households are ending, but the pubs are still open, and so it is confusing, because I know that having an extended household, for example, such as for yourself, can be very useful, but then the pubs are open. I don't understand some of the reasoning behind some of the guidelines.
Well, I know here now in North Ireland, I think the pub restrictions are a lot more stricter than it is across the water. Could it be England, Scotland, Wales? That if you get a table, you can only sit in a table of 6 people, and within that 6 people, it can only be made up of 2 households. So it would be in the pubs and restaurants. I think it goes a little bit of a way of doing it, because I'm not going to advocate the pubs and restaurants have to close, because it's important for some people to get out there and mix, but it has to be done right. So in that respect, it's a wee bit strict maybe where you are, but still to me it does seem nonsensical that that it's impossible to mix with your family. But if you want to meet them, you can't meet them in the house, but sure, let's go down to the pub and we'll meet them there, because I see it.
Yeah, it does seem a bit strange, and I don't really understand some of the reasoning. And one of the things that I've seen an awful lot of is people being upset about students returning to university. But I think people really need to be mindful, one, because as a student, I can basically share what's happening with students, but also for disabled students who are being impacted as well, and who are maybe shielding. But many of these students have left home for the first time. They are now in, a flat or a house with potentially 5 other people, or I was talking to someone who's in a flat with 13 other people, because that's the size of the halls that they're in, and these are strangers, and they don't know what's available locally, what's happening. Some of them are maybe having to quarantine. I think people are forgetting that if they struggled and they were in lockdown, but they were with their family, how difficult it must be for someone to be far away from home with complete strangers in that situation. And I think it's one of the things that, a lot more kindness could go out there. So like, again, if someone is medically exempt from wearing a mask, they can, they might have a sunflower lanyard on, or they may have a badge, which I happen to sell these badges. It's Craftical hit on Etsy. I'll just put throw in a wee plug there, but like I make badges
we'll put the
that
link
say,
in below as well.
yeah, I make badges that say someone's high risk or mask exempt, and that's simply because sometimes people just need that little something for a little bit of confidence, because there have been people with hidden disabilities who have been verbally abused in the street because they're not wearing a mask. But like, you don't know what someone's disability is, and I think generally we should give the benefit of the doubt. There was a viral post on Facebook of someone who was misusing the sunflower lanyard, but at the same time I would much rather make the mistake that I would much rather assume that someone is genuinely medically exempt, than not,
Well,
because it's already
would,
difficult if you
I
have a
would,
hidden disability.
well, I would like to make that, I wouldn't want to assume so many non-disabled just because they're not wearing their mask or looking after themselves, because I think that's where a lot of the anxiety issues are coming from as well, because there are people who are exempt, but they're too scared to go out anyway because, they're fearful of the reaction they're going to get. In fact, I actually retweeted on my reaction tonight, which is, if you're listening to this on the podcast tomorrow, last night, it was a woman from Scotland who, would be exempt from mask because her disabilities are invisible. However, and she refused to go out now because she was just being abused non-stop by people screaming and shouting. And I can guarantee you some of these people were probably not even wearing the mask themselves, or if they were, highlighted earlier, Felicity, weren't wearing them out. People making too quick of a judgment on people, and that's why the lanyard scheme is very important. But it does dishearten me and it makes me angry because I witnessed that posted one viral too. And unfortunately, I mean, that is the one that went viral, but Felicity, yourself, we've seen other ones that are more locally going, well, people are asking, where you get this lanyard? Well, I can get you one, don't you worry. We can get in the pub there and we can mix up because we'll not have to wear a mask because we can pretend we're disabled.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, it's like anything when people sort of say there's benefit abuse, it's a very small minority of people. And I think that really needs to be emphasized. It is a minority of people, but those people are making it more difficult for disabled people generally. And, I think when we're talking about kindness and maybe checking in on others and things like this, that yes, there are these viral posts. Yes, they are infuriating, but at the same time, hidden disabilities are hidden. You don't know. And it's better to just, go with the benefit of the doubt, because a lot of these people are being told, well, if you're that disabled, why don't you just stay inside? You should just not come outside. You should just be in there. And the thing is, a lot of these people, maybe they have to work, maybe they need groceries and they can't get a slot online and they've had to go out. We still have lives to live. We can't, I think a lot of those people who say stuff like this, if they suddenly had to stop doing everything, they would find it difficult. And I'm pretty sure, if they were to step into our shoes for a single day and take on the advice that they're giving, they would really struggle with that.
But I see, that's the thing, that gone are them days in the past where disabled people had to be quiet, had to stay home, stay out of sight. I'm worried that people will want them days to return again. Well, I'm promising Melissa, I'm not going to stay at home. Well, I will until it's safe again. But when I am out, I'll be wearing a mask. I'm not one for sitting on. I'm a guy that likes to get out there, live his life and do things. And Felicity, you're saying you're one of them that loves to get out there. You will actively take part in life where possible, because I know you're into certain sports and certain cosplays and stuff like that there. So you're very interested in this sort of stuff. And for somebody to say to you, no, stay at home, you don't count anymore, we don't want to hear from you anymore, I'm not going to let them days return again.
Yeah, was it that sports reference? That'll probably come up on a separate podcast, but I generally don't take no for an answer when people make assumptions about disabilities and closed doors, such as certain sporting adventures that I was maybe looking into starting, but apparently disabled people can't do sport. So that was a fun discovery, which I will be challenging. But yeah, it's a difficult time, I think, for everybody. It's especially difficult when you're disabled. And I think, I also have a learning disability. And when we're looking at the NICE guidelines during the first lockdown, the NICE guidelines basically prioritized people who didn't have a learning disability, who weren't autistic, who didn't have a long-term health issue. So they had to revise those because they had a clinical frailty scale. And so right now it's not being used against patients who are under 65, anyone of any age with a stable long-term disability such as cerebral palsy, a learning disability or autism, because there was a genuine fear that, if you got sick and you went into hospital, you may not receive treatment because you were disabled. And I know that's something that I had to have a discussion with family, because I was very worried about this, because there had been people local to me that their GP surgery had sent out a letter suggesting that they sign a do not resuscitate. And, it goes back to the idea that our lives are not seen as valuable. And it's just, it's very difficult, because a lot of the deaths, that almost half of the deaths of people with a learning disability were COVID related, during lockdown. And it's really, it's an actual scandal when you look at the actual statistics. And
like I know here, like even in
yeah,
the North of Ireland, I don't know what the statistic is at the moment. It's a bit unclear, but I know at the very beginning that half the deaths that belong to nursing homes, which did turn into a major scandal here, which has been investigated. So I don't know what the outcome when that'll be made public. It was very angry, and as you said, because of the I don't know in this particular case, but a lot of cases which have to do with the DNRs. And thankfully, I never had a sign one. I would never have to, and if I ever was, I never would. But
well, you're
I
lucky
do.
because I have been asked to in the
Okay.
past.
But
Yeah.
I know other ones, particularly now in COVID, who have been asked to do that. And thankfully, because they were aware of that, they were able to say no because they understood the implications. But then, if you know yourself, listen, there will be other people who might not understand for whatever reason because of the stress of the environment they're under, maybe the fear of COVID being in hospital, that they're just needing something from the doctor, not realising what's happening. And it just brings it back to what you said earlier, and it's something that I believe too, that in a lot of cases, that while it might not be what they're saying, but it's certainly the message that they're giving us that we're second-class citizens and we're not equal and we're not an equal member of society.
Yeah, because like, I mean, put it this way, you do some absolutely amazing work. You run My Way Access, you bring an awful lot to the community. But if you got ill and you went into the hospital under the original clinical frailty measurements that they had, so obviously, just in case anyone's listening and they're worried, they have updated these guidelines. But under the original ones, you wouldn't have been necessarily prioritized for a ventilator. And like, how are we judging people's lives here? My life has meaning. My life, I live, a full and I like to think quite exciting life. But
Oh, you do.
the judgment comes from basically the name of a disability and all these sort of assumptions that come along with it, that people think that my life must be worth less or not as good. And it's a very negative assumption, and it goes back, like we were talking about inspiration porn before the start of the show, and
Yeah.
the idea that when someone sees that, so you'll see like someone in a wheelchair and it'll say your excuse is invalid, and the reason that exists is because it makes non-disabled people feel better about themselves. It guilts them in a way,
Yeah.
and they go, oh, that poor person, their life must be so awful. And it's just a person just minding their own business. They're just in their wheelchair, possibly having a great time. There's some of them, you'll see them, they're playing basketball or they're out with friends, but it's just like, oh no. And like, that really upsets me, because like I talk about it a lot, where I had someone say to me, it's good to see someone like you out and about when I was on the bus. Getting the bus is not inspirational.
Well, as I said to you in a previous podcast, that I had something similar to that, but while I was saying to you that British ski out, they actually turned to my friend, but wasn't it great that you brought him out?
Yeah, like, oh.
That's a discussion for another day, because I know we want to discuss inspirational porn as a major podcast someday, because I know something that me and you are very, I'm not saying angry about, but we have very strong views on, and we'll definitely cover that. But as I was saying, even about the DNRs, yeah, but you're saying it's inspirational porn, but I'd also feel it sort of breaks down the model between the medical disability model and the social disability model, because the doctors and the nurses, whatever case, medical team will be looking at us as medically disabled, whereas you don't see yourself as that. We would see it as a social disability.
Yeah,
And that's
so
what I think the difference is.
yeah, so basically the medical model implies that a disabled person has something that needs to be fixed or to be cured. The onus is on the disabled person as being the problem. So for example, and I mean, it's overused, but let's say there's steps going into a building and a person is in a wheelchair. The reason the person can't get into the building under the medical model is because they are disabled and in a wheelchair, and they have a condition that means, they can't get up those steps. The social model instead takes the onus away from the disabled person and sees it as a societal issue. So basically, when people are building buildings and thinking things through, they're not considering the entirety of society. They're creating barriers. So that person in a wheelchair is not disabled because they're in a wheelchair. They're disabled because that building has steps. The disability is the barrier. That's what's the disabling factor in this. And, it's generally why people use the term that they are a disabled person rather than a person with a disability. It's not separate from them. And, we've had massive discussions on the importance of language. But yeah, like the medical and the social model, I think is a really important example, because you will see a lot of doctors who focus on the medical model. And that's kind of what leads people to suggesting do not resuscitate orders as being a valid option when they're not.
Well, they're far from not in the majority of cases for anybody.
Yeah, like there are situations where people maybe would consider it, but like, we're living our best lives. Yes, there's a pandemic, but that doesn't suddenly mean I'm going to sign a do not resuscitate order. I deserve access to that ventilator like anyone else.
Well, I know, for example, we're both in lockdown, but we're still living the fullest life as we can because we're utilising the technology around it, especially with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and stuff like that. So while we're not doing what we might have been necessarily been doing before, we're doing other things that are equally as important and equally important to us, but to society as well. In fact, if it wasn't for the lockdown, the podcast wouldn't have happened. Yes, it was always in the pipeline, but it was always in the pipeline next month. But it took a global pandemic to get this started.
Yeah, we tend to be so busy that sometimes everything's sort of like, I'll get back to you, but then it's like next month. It's like, did you ever do that?
But that just shows you, people think we're disabled, lockdown, well, that's it, our life's gone. No, it's not. We're just doing it different. We're doing the same thing, but we're doing something different, but we're doing it in an alternative way. So that our life still has the same value as it was before lockdown, and day in out isn't going to change that.
Yeah, and we're very adaptable, disabled people, because we have to be. So I would like to think that that's a selling point.
Well, I think disabled people are the most adaptable people in the entire world.
Yeah, we tend to be good at thinking outside of the box. Like, you should see the plans I have for my wheelchair. Oh, it's so good. I have all these plans to just sort of fully design it and makeshift it into what I want and need it to be. But there are things that you wouldn't necessarily think of or find online. And when I finally get it fully done, it's going to be great. But for example, the foot rest on my wheelchair is not to the right size. So I have a yoga pad that I've put there, but it's got Velcro on it, so I can remove it as and when I need. So say if I'm wearing high heels, just remove the yoga pad and I can look fabulous in a dress and high heels. So little small adaptations, and I think generally people don't think about that, and it's definitely a selling point. And now that I think about it, I may add that to my CV.
I think that's a very important addition to the CV, thinking outside the box. Well, now, I think we've really got to the end of the talk about COVID. So we had a bit of a laugh there at the end, which is great because I think we all have been a bit of a laugh and a bit of humour, but I think people could probably pick up on a different tone than me, and probably me as well. I'm quite a jovial guy most weeks, but as you can tell that I'm starting to get a bit more angry, a bit more frustrated with what's going on around me, especially, as I say, people sort of laughing off the need for masks and sanitation, or refusing to believe that the whole thing's real. And that's the wrong way to do that. I admit, being angry and being wrong and frustrated isn't the right emotion to do. It should be more proactive, more educated, trying to change people's minds in a better way. I think people can forgive us for being a bit frustrated with the way things are at the moment. But this time next week I'll be laughing about something else. I'll talk about important things. So we will take a little break now, and we will come back and we'll chat a little about what's going on with our lives this week. So Felicity and our listeners, I will see you on the other side. Welcome back. Well, that was definitely a great big discussion we had earlier, Felicity, about the whole COVID. The whole thing got a little heated at the end during it, but I think we got it over in a jovial fashion at the same time, as well as giving important points across. But now we're just going to have a little discussion about what we've both been gearing up to this week. So, Felicity, I believe you have been doing a little bit of work with a friend of mine from previous life this week. So would you like to tell us all about what you've been up to?
Yeah, so was it Michael, your friend, has reached out to me, and I've been doing a little bit of work for Udrafter, exploring accessibility and issues of access with a focus on the user experience of the website, but accessibility more generally. And so Udrafter is a micro-internship business, and they are really seeking to talk to actual disabled people and people who are in different marginalized groups about their experiences and how they can, adapt the website and make sure that they're very inclusive and flexible to meet needs. So, for example, you can get, work from as little as 2 hours up to potentially months at a time, and everything is paid. So, it's good, and it's really good to see that they're taking accessibility really serious, because right now 70% of UK websites are completely inaccessible. So it's really important to see businesses take an active approach to exploring this, but also actively talking to those affected. So, as the disability slogan goes, nothing about us without us. But I do believe you are doing a similar presentation on accessibility next week for CRAIC NI.
That's correct, Felicity. As no doubt the listeners are aware now, I've been on an online course through Zoom. One of my lockdown activities is a level 3 course on cultural awareness training. So we've actually come to the end of the course now, so I have quite a bit of coursework now to do over the next month. But our practical is on Tuesday, where I have to give a 20-minute presentation to do with culture or some sort of diversity. Of course, with me being disabled, I decided to do mine on disability. What else? So obviously the whole thing will be covered in the coursework of being an hour-long presentation. So I will be discussing some of the terms and stuff within that wider thing, but I will be taking a section out of that, which will be the 20-minute thing that I'll be doing. So I will be using it as role-playing and talking to business leaders or business communities within the sector. So for the sake of this, I will be attending that I'm talking to the Omagh Chamber of Commerce and Industry Committee members. And me being a member of the Omagh Chamber and actually being a committee member myself, I thought this would be a good opportunity to start developing that, because one of the main reasons that I had joined Omagh Chamber was actually to do this and to educate the local businesses on what they need to do. I will be talking for 20 minutes. I decided to break it down into 3 main cores. Without actually going into physically what they need to do, because this will be part of the 1 hour discussion, which I'm currently developing at the moment, and I will be taking out to businesses. But for the sake of the presentation, I'm going to be talking about what is disability. So I'm going to be asking all these men, women, and them exactly what do they think is a disability? What do they think of when they think of people who are disabled? And literally, I'm sure I can imagine some of the answers that are in a wheelchair. That's not the case. It is in my case, but it's not in many people's cases, because their disability covers a wide load of things, as our listeners know, from hearing to sight to mental health to learning disabilities. There's a whole wealth of knowledge that business leaders need to be aware of. And then that will bring me into the next point about which we touched upon in the podcast earlier. I'm going to be having business. Do they know what the social model of disability is? Because I want to highlight to them that yes, I'm disabled, but I don't identify myself as a medically disabled model type of person, and I identify myself as socially disabled, and the onus of them is to adapt, not for me to adapt to them. So I'm going to be discussing a little bit about that there, and I'm going to round off the 20 minutes by talking about the purple pound, which is another topic I talk quite a lot about in the podcast, and I believe Felicity, you spoke a little bit about it earlier today as well. I'm going to be forming these business leaders that within the North of Ireland anyway, the disabled people make up 19.5% of the population. While morally it's wrong to exclude her from the business, from a business point of view, it's fiscally nonsensical as well to exclude her, because they're harming their business. They remain excluding us. So I will be talking a little about that. So that's what my 20 minutes will be talking about.
That sounds really, really interesting. And it touches on a lot of the things that I explored with Udrafter as well, such as, the purple pound and the fact that businesses are missing out on £2 billion a month because they're not actually understanding that they need to address issues of access for disabled customers. And, it's a really interesting area. And granted, mine was focused more on the web content accessibility guidelines, which if you do have a quick Google of them after the show, they may look very daunting. I promise you, they're not as bad as they look. They're actually very friendly when you break them down. But, accessibility is something that's very close to our heart. It's really, really important. And, I think if people were to take one thing away from the podcast, it's maybe just to sort of think about how they could try to ensure that they have accessibility or incorporate into what they're doing every day, because it's easier to start incorporating it now than to do it in hindsight and go, oh dear, we've built this entire thing and it's inaccessible. So like you build a shop, it's inaccessible. There's additional expenses trying to renovate that afterwards. If you have it at your core foundation of everything you do, not only does it help disabled people, it also makes financial sense.
Exactly. As disabled people know the world over, we're always brought on at the very end to fix the problem to help them create it. And all we're asking is bring it on the very start, and we will help you avoid these problems to begin with.
Yeah, there is a lot of emotional labor sometimes involved in stuff in hindsight, where people go, oops, and they come along and we're like, oh dear, and they sort of expect like expertise after the fact usually. And I think it's really important, yes, that we have disabled people being involved and being a part of the discussion, but it has to be done in a meaningful way and a genuine way, as in, because I know that personally I've been brought in onto committees sometimes in the past where it's kind of like the token disabled person, and it's there kind of so that they've ticked a box. And so like one of the things I quite liked about this week was that it did feel very, very meaningful, and I think a lot of businesses really need to do that and incorporate this in just to everyday practice.
Again, like, I mean, I'm a member of the Commander Noma District Council Disability Advisory Group, and I'm a member, obviously, a committee member of the Homewood Chambers of Commerce Industry. And while some of the stuff I be sort of getting across might be lost in translation, some of the cases are quite recent as well, but we're not divulged into that just yet. In a lot of the cases, it is meaningful. But again, one thing that needs to be addressed, we brought in the volunteers. I addressed this in an earlier podcast where we brought in volunteers, and then when we actually go looking for a career in this line, that the work we've done in volunteers, whether it's been 6 months or 6 years, in my case, that the voluntary work that we've done does not be taken into consideration, because it's not actually paid work. So I do think it needs to be addressed in the future that, yes, we need to be involved, and at the moment, on a voluntary basis, that works maybe for now. It's not perfect, it's not great, but it needs to be more meaningful, and because we're giving up our free time, we're giving up our expertise to educate you, to help you run your business or to help you run your organisation. We're doing it for nothing, and this needs to be something that needs to be addressed in the future as well. This needs to be part of a career plan for many disabled people, if that's the career that they wish to have, and not as some might put as other people might look at as a quote unquote a hobby.
Yeah, and I think again, an example would be what I do at the university. So I'm a project coordinator for the Wellbeing Champions. I'm helping run 2 separate societies in the middle of a pandemic and helping to move everything online. So for example, with the Role Play Society, we have at least over 20 groups of people who want to be running campaigns online, which we're helping to facilitate. And that number will go up when term officially starts. And with Hogwarts, we're facilitating that as well. And then when we come to the Wellbeing Champions, I am doing absolutely everything for the management of it, organizing the events, chasing people up. Like I have a specialized email and I have 2 weeks worth of training to do in order to do that. So I think voluntary work needs to be taken a lot more seriously. And, sometimes it is difficult as a disabled person to get a job, but voluntary work shouldn't be dismissed because some of us are, well, not even some of us, all of us generally have amazing transferable skills. And, I think there just needs to be more of an appreciation of that. And again, like I said earlier, we're really adaptable and we think outside of the box. And I think it's unfortunate that sometimes in business, people generally think, oh, I'm going to have to make adaptations to my workplace and, this, that, and the other. But if you think about it, someone in work could break a leg, they could break their fingers, they could have issues maybe using the keyboard. But if you have Dragon software, for example, which is a speech-to-text software already installed, then the person who's broken their fingers, they can keep working. There's temporarily acquired disabilities. Considering access now, again, I feel like a broken record here. It benefits absolutely everyone. It's not an additional expense to hire a disabled person. It's really an asset to the company.
Just before we knock off the podcast today, I just wanted to congratulate new tourist site that's opening up not far from me in the future. Actually, next month on the 17th of October, the OM Dark Skies on Observatory. I had recently just learned during the week that they've obviously just built a new build, and part of their plan was to treat more aware of people with disabilities. What I was delighted to learn is part of their facilities was, which is very rare in this part of the country anyway, never mind in the north of Ireland, but this part of the country as well, is that they actually have changing places facilities, which I was delighted and amazed. And now people might be looking at my words and say, that boy's just nothing but complain. He rings up and he just says, this is wrong. But I was actually delighted by what I had learned that day. I actually rang them and congratulated them for this. While we have to highlight what's going on, you still have to contact the businesses and let them know when they've done something right. You've done it right, and it's appreciated. And they were happy to hear that. They said that because they understood that, disabled people, and was delighted to hear them say that. They said they understood disabled people make up 20%, nearly 20% of the population, and they couldn't deny us access and do that, not only because of the fact that we deserve to see the dark sky, especially up there in the Sperrin Mountains, which is only one of 3 recognised dark spots in the whole of the island of Ireland. But it's opened up tourism for everybody else. So tourists coming into Ireland can come and visit as well. And disabled tourists, so it makes financial sense for them to do that as well. But that wasn't their driving force. Their driving force is that they wanted to be inclusive for the whole society. And as I say, they've certainly done that. And I'm looking forward to get up there to see them. So from my way access and from Access All Areas, just congratulations, and I can't wait to get up there and see the Sperrin Mountains and dark sky for all their beauty. So just to take it away tonight, Felicity, anything you want to tell our listeners to what they can take away from the podcast tonight or tomorrow or today or wherever they're listening?
So I think my main takeaway is just to be kind. Obviously, if we're going into a second lockdown, there's going to be people who have not stopped shielding, and there's no harm sort of checking in on people, especially given the impact that lockdown is having on people's mental health. I'd also say that yes, we are seeing people without masks, but there are people who are medically exempt, and just to give people the benefit of the doubt, because a lot of people who have hidden disabilities who can't wear their mask, they're already very concerned about going out because of the risks of coronavirus, without also having the additional concern that they're going to face potential verbal abuse in the street. And finally, just that disabled people were very adaptable. We're great workers. We are an integral part of any workforce. And, when you're thinking about how to make things more accessible, just think of the slogan, nothing about us without us. And that applies to other groups as well. So like if you wanted to include people of color or, was it the LGBT community, that would apply also with them. Ask the people directly impacted rather than assuming. Because there is a thing that assuming makes a certain part of you and of me, I'll not say it, but it's in the word.
Yeah, friendly family podcast, so we'll not delve out into that. But I kind of just want to echo back what you said, Felicity, particularly focusing on the mask. If you're able to wear a mask and you're not exempt, please wear it when you're out and about. And next time, sanitize your hands, going in and out of public premises, as well as in your own home. And try and keep a social distance, because the numbers are rising, the infections are rising. We can't beat this, but you have to play a part now, because 6 months time down the line, it could be too late. Then it could spiral out of control, and it could end up being something that we can't bring back. So please, this is the moment now. I've been saying it for 6 months, but I mean it now. If you can wear a mask and you're not exempt, please wear it. Don't be making excuses where there are no excuses. Don't believe the whole story. Don't believe this is part of a new world order. Don't believe that this is all a scam or this is all to get fun vaccines. It's not. Please wear a mask.
Yeah, and just as a person whose background and master's is in public health, I can tell you this is a communicable disease. It is not a hoax.
Well, I think that really covers it all for this week. So, today, I hope you have a great week. And our listeners, I hope you have a fantastic, safe week. And you're all masked up and gloved up and sanitized, and we will all see you back next week.